Hi everyone, welcome to week 4, chapter 4, listening. And we've talked a lot about what communication is. We've talked about perception and how that changes. We've talked about the difference between interpersonal and intrapersonal communication. So we've talked about a lot, we've covered a lot. And this week we're going to talk about listening. And clearly, communication is based on listening, and one of the fundamental components is listening well and appropriately. And so in order to build communication skills, you need to be able to build your listening skills. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time on this, and I do think that this will be one of your more enjoyable chapters. I think it's a very good chapter. So I hope that you enjoyed the reading, and I hope that you'll enjoy this lecture as well. So let's get started. So I have a couple of questions for you all. In thinking about outstanding communicators, recognizing people that you believe are extremely good at communicating ideas, and they have honed those skills well, and they have done their work, and they have been able to effectively communicate, think of someone you know to whom you'd like to give an award as an outstanding communicator. It can be a trusted friend, a family member, someone you've known a very long time, since kindergarten, someone you've just met. There's no stipulations on who that may be, but I would just like you to think of someone, the first person that pops into your mind if I say an outstanding communicator. Who would that be? Who would you like to give that award to? And once you have defined that person, what are the defining characteristics that make that person an excellent communicator? So not only do you need to think of who would I say I believe is an outstanding communicator, but why do you choose that person? What about them leads you to believe that they are an outstanding communicator? What characteristics do they possess that put them in that category apart from others that may just be average communicators, or unfortunately sometimes sub-average communicators? And then to kind of take that a little further, how did it make you feel to communicate with them when you felt like they were really listening to you? And remember, often I think we think of outstanding communicators in terms of people who can speak well, or people who have eloquence, or they are well spoken. But interestingly, outstanding communicators, especially in this chapter, are good listeners as well. And so I wanted you to make sure that you identified the difference there, because you might have initially said, wow, that person really communicates ideas effectively. But on the flip side, an outstanding communicator also needs to be able to listen and make the other person feel heard. So if you would like to reflect on these questions, that would be fine. How did it make you feel to communicate with them when you felt like they were really listening to you? And focus on your feelings there, not just, well, I knew that they heard me, or I knew that they understood what I meant. Think about your emotions involved when you felt that they truly understood what you meant. So, some more food for thought. Are these conclusions that we can draw? So, the first one, do we already know what good listening skills are? Are you a person that would say, yes, I know what good listening skills are, and I could define them for you, I could give you a list? If that is not you, and you would say, no, that's not a conclusion that I would draw, I think I can learn good listening skills, I think I've just, been able to communicate okay for a long time, but I've never really learned or been told what good listening skills are. So I think there are going to be students that fall into both ends of the spectrum, and then somewhere in the middle is where most of you might fall. And then is this another conclusion you might draw, that if we do know what good listening skills are, that we use them as often as we could? I think, at least for me, I would argue no. I do know good listening skills, but I probably don't use them as often as I could. And what do you think about how powerful the feeling is of being heard? And I want to qualify that to really heard, because you can be heard on a certain level, but what does it mean to you when you know that the other person completely has understood and taken in what you have communicated? And then how does this information help us? So if we know what good listening skills are, or at least we're going to learn them, using them as often as we could, and the power of being truly heard, that is really helpful information. If we just focus on those three things, we would be much better communicators. So this information throughout this whole chapter is designed to give you a backbone or a foundation for moving forward with communication, and really making sure that you can adjust and communicate effectively as you learn some new techniques and tips. Okay, so hearing versus listening, huge concept, really, really important. And for some of you, you might say, yes, I've heard this before. Some of you may say, oh my gosh, I've never even considered this. So the difference between hearing versus listening is crucial in communication. So what is the difference? And I'm going to tell you, but before I get into the definitions, I would like you to, on your piece of paper or somewhere, where you can jot something down, just your initial impression, your initial thoughts, the difference between hearing versus listening. What makes them different? What do they have in common? If you want to do that, you can maybe do it from the opposite side. What do they have that's similar? But what is the difference between hearing versus listening? There is one, for those of you that may say nothing. Okay, hearing is a physiological process of decoding sounds. So something that occurs in your body when your ears process a sound. So you hear something and you want to make sense. Remember, we always try to organize information and make sense of information. So our bodies literally physically process the sounds that we hear, and we try to identify what they may be. Listening, a much more in-depth definition for a reason, selecting, attending to, and creating meaning from and responding to verbal and nonverbal messages. I know that's a lot, so let's look at all these pieces. Selecting. And I'll actually go through each of them in detail, but we choose. Notice that it's a physiological process in hearing, which means it's involuntary. Our ears respond because we have that sense, and our brain decodes it. We have very little control over that. When we listen, we specifically choose, we select what we pay attention to, we attend to it, so we focus on it, we create meaning from it, similar to the process of decoding in hearing, but creating meaning is a more personal choice, and then you respond to verbal and notice nonverbal messages. So hearing, solely sound-based. Listening, nonverbal cues as well. And one of our future chapters is nonverbal communication, one of my favorites actually, and so we'll spend a lot of time on nonverbal messages. But it's very interesting that we often think of listening solely as sound-based, and it's not. Okay, so this is important to know. In order to listen to something, first you must select the sound, attend to it, understand it, and remember it. So, 4-step process for listening. Notice hearing is 1. So, listening requires a lot more from us as communicators. So we have to listen to it. That just kind of occurs. We have to select the sound, attend to it, understand it, and remember it. So let's look at those a little further. So what is selecting? It's choosing one sound from all competing sounds. So if you are in a very, very crowded classroom or concert or store or wherever you may be where there are a lot of people and it's very noisy, it's very interesting how you tend to hear your name in and amongst all of the din of the room. And for me, my name is a little bit unique. It's Brenna. And so I will often respond even if it's something close. So I don't know if you find that too, but if you have a name that, I guess even if it's common, but if it, if you hear a sound that sounds like your name, you tend to pay attention because we're so attuned to that cue. We respond to our name. So we choose one sound from all competing sounds. Now, can you select more than sounds? So if you're thinking about what you're going to choose, can you also select what you're seeing or what you're feeling or what you're smelling? Yes, you can. So all of your senses are involved in the selection process. which that's important to note because it can be sensory overload sometimes if there's a lot going on and you have sense and sights and sounds and everything. It can be really overwhelming and overstimulating. Okay, so we select first, then we attend. So we focus on the sound that we've selected. And you attend to sounds. This is interesting. Again, a little bit of the selfish motivation here. You attend to sounds that meet your needs or are consistent with what you think you should be focusing on. So we either are trying to have our needs met or we feel pressured to focus on certain things. So if you're in a lecture, for example, like right now maybe, you may feel pressured that you should be focusing on what I'm saying. So even if your phone is ringing or the dog is barking or your roommates or your people you live with are talking, whatever, you are trying at least to focus on the lecture because that's what you think you should be focusing on. What's interesting is you're more likely to attend to messages. Sorry, I do this at night, and I should probably do this in the morning when I'm not sleepy. Okay, you're more likely to attend to messages that are important to you or are novel or are intense. So let's look at those briefly. So if something means a lot to you, you have been waiting to hear from a friend and you finally get to hear a voicemail from them, or you get to see them in person, you're more likely to pay attention and focus on what they're saying. If something is novel, so it's a little unique, it draws your attention because there's something different about it, or something that's intense, so something that catches you off guard or surprises you or is really powerful, those are things that we focus on because those draw our attention the most. Conflict, humor, new ideas, and concrete things command our attention more than abstract things. So if anytime there's an argument or a conflict, we will focus on that. Humor, wit, any type of funny instances will tend to get our attention. Something new, something we haven't thought of, something that is maybe a challenge for us, that's something we will pay attention to. And concrete things, so very definable, clear things. Abstract things are much more difficult to focus on, and that makes sense. I mean, think about abstract art. What do you even look at when you look at a piece of abstract art? There's usually lots of colors and lots of shapes, and none of them really are defined. And so if you have that compared to a bowl of fruit that has been painted, clearly the bowl of fruit is what you're going to focus on when you look at the painting. And then the abstract art, there's a lot less that you can truly pay attention to. Okay, so we select, then we attend, then we understand. We assign meaning to the sounds that we select and attend to. Does that make sense? And then we understand things best if we can relate what we hear to something we already know. So again, it's our frame of reference. And if we select a sound or nonverbal cue, we attend to it, so we focus on it, and then we try to understand it. If it's similar and, makes sense with what we've already experienced or what we already believe, we better understand it, of course, because that makes sense within our worldview. We also understand best that which we've experienced. So something we've already known or something we've experienced, that is the easiest for us to understand. Interestingly, similar individuals have a greater likelihood for accurate understanding. So the more similar you are with someone in culture, beliefs, race, religion, whatever, similar individuals tend to understand each other more accurately. And again, that comes back from it's what you know, it's what you've experienced, so you don't have to try so hard to make sense of things because you already kind of have that instinctual understanding. And then finally, remembering. So this is your ability to recall information. And most of the information that you hear is stored in short-term memory. And actually, this is kind of a funny story. I tell this sometimes because there's this concept, I think I actually mentioned it before, echoic listening. And so the idea that we hear things and stored in short-term memory, often that physiological process occurs without us really focusing on it very much at all. And so that short-term memory bank, if we do not really attend and select and focus on those things, it goes in short-term memory and it disappears. Long-term memory is where we store events, conversations, and other data that is significant. So something really good or bad, but significant. Oh my goodness. When we store events,